So the title of this vlog kind of gives it away. I needed to do that for search purposes as we upload to my archives here. But the question was going to be, what's a battle mech without legs? What's a battle mech without legs? I mean, we've got 2 legs. We've got 4 legs. I guess if a Scorpion or a Goliath got all of its legs blown off, it would just kind of be a turret or an immobilized type tank. But the design philosophy of this tank, we're looking at the von Luckner. And if you've been following my Battletech channel, I love mechs. I love mechs. But I also love tanks. I also love heavy tanks. I like big gun type tanks. So the von Luckner is up there in terms of boom boom and in terms of what you can bring to the table. It was designed in the tech manuals. It's always fun to kind of look through the tech manuals and get that narrative. It was designed as a conventional vehicle to fight battle mechs, a battle mech without legs, bringing that technological terror, that firepower, without investing in the high-level tech of a mech. Okay, does it do it? We're going to leave battle value. Some of you guys are battle value experts. I mean, my calculations are usually close if it's a test, plus or minus 100 or so. But we're going to leave the battle value out until the very end. Let's look at the weapons configuration, because the 2 points that we know, you've got heavy armor. It's a heavy battle tank, and it does have a turret. Turret is important, especially with some weapon configurations, because if you get immobilized or as you start taking motive hits and losing mobility, tank tactica in general, we're not going to cover that. I've posted that up to my channel here under the Battletech playlist, and we've explored that with some other things. But the idea I have to mention with a tank, and the von Luckner has a turret tank, you're not as vulnerable. At least if you get immobilized or suddenly something breaks out, a hidden unit, you're facing 2-on-1, you have a lot more options in facing than compared to some mechs. And we're going to try and really utilize that. So the first thing, you guys know where I'm going with this. Autocannon 20 on the turret. You can't argue with that. That is Inner Sphere, Succession era. That's as big as you're going to get. The only way you're going to get bigger is mounting 2 autocannon 20s. But then it's called a demolisher, and there's drawbacks to having that or not having that. We also have an interesting, so right away, that's close range punch. But we take it a lot more as a battle tank in that we add 2 short range missile 6 and a short range missile 4-pack. That combination, those 4 weapons right there, that's massive short range punch. And we don't have the redundancy of the autocannon 20, which means you've got 1 shot, but you do have to get closer to use it. And if you're a defensive type tank, you can move to the objective or hold the objective, not move, so you'll keep your modifiers down. You only have 1 shot. But you also have this punch with the missiles. And what's interesting is the synergy behind it. Yes, it's a lot of close-range firepower. But if you can punch a hole with that autocannon 20, which other than, think about it. In 1 turn, for the majority of mechs, at least half and lower in the weight classes, you're going to punch through to internals on 1 turn. If you are fighting assaults and heavies, if they're softened up either by this tank or other units, you could potentially punch through in 1 turn. Then you've got the missiles firing away on that next salvo. And from that perspective, they become mini crit-seeking type attacks, but a tremendous amount of synergy at a close-range punch. We get even closer, and you've got a flamer, and you've got machine guns. So you have a way that if you're point blank, you got a little more crit-seeking, you got a little more dice. I'll always take that machine gun shot. But you also have a way to deal with infantry. And that's important, especially with this tank and especially being a close-in tank. And we're going to kind of make a footnote of that to review in a second. The long-range capacity, we've got a long-range 10-pack. I'd like a 15, I'd like 20, but, then again, if I was designing a tank, it would have like 4 autocannon 20s and like 5 LRM 20 packs, and just there's no way you could pack in all the toys that I want. That's why we got to take multiples. But at least it has something at long range. And the 10-pack, you can also do a little bit of indirect fire if you want. So the opposite synergy tactica of how this tank plays, and this is what does make it more vulnerable than you would think to infantry going against that Tactica, but we've got the machine guns, we've got the flamers, or machine gun and flamer, is the fact that it's a very, very aggressive tank. It's a close-range tank. It wants to get up there. It needs to get up there. It needs to get 5 hexes, 3 hexes, 1 hex, point blank. If you're going into city fight, city tech, you're all set. If you're going into peaks and valleys, some of the hex maps, you're going to have to cross some open terrain. Okay, a little bit challenging, but you can do it. If you're on an open board, it's going to be a lot more challenging because you're going to take a lot of heat on the way in. You at least have that LRM-10 to do something. And yes, given how vehicles work, when you're point blank, you're going to shoot the LRM-10 even with all the modifiers also. Look, you roll enough dice, spray and pray, something is going to hit. And if we can bring down those modifiers, then a lot more is going to hit. But long range gives you something to do on the way in. It's like that battle mech that's heavy or assault that is primarily geared towards close, medium, laser, short-range missile packs, that perspective. But, it has an LRM pack or it has a PPC like the Battlemaster, something to do on the way in. But having all of these weapons and having that turret, we want to utilize it. The AC-20 on the turret. We want to utilize all that close in. Now, this is where it gets vulnerable to infantry because the bane of all vehicles, and I haven't forgotten about battle value yet, the bane of all vehicles is motive hits, and infantry deliver that tremendous for the battle value. Side note, something else to check out in the archives. If you're new to Battletech, check out my playlist, Warrior Helicopters. I'm giving you permission right now. Fritz is authorizing C-bill expenditure for 2 to 4 warriors. You add those, if you have to justify more miniatures to that significant other, and you're not like sneaking them in through the back door, then I can't tell you how many times I'm like, just don't open the back of the trunk and it's all good and we'll like sneak these things in at midnight. But I give you permission right now to go out and buy multiple warriors. Battle value's tremendous. It's an attack helicopter. It's got long range. It's got speed. It's great against vehicles taken in packs because you're going to be throwing multiple shots at motive hits, especially if you can get side armor. And I wasn't kidding about going out and buying those warriors. I give you permission. Looking at that, the von Luckner, this massive tank, if it grinds down on the treads, then it's kind of sitting there. And if it's sitting there, it doesn't have the 360 arc of the long-range missiles, so it's locked into however that's facing. And you have short-range missiles, it's kind of sad-faced because everyone's going to run away and you're not going to be able to effectively engage. Infantry for the battle value in buildings, getting dropped off by Karnovs, jump infantry, hanging out. When they're just firing everything, that spread and the way you roll to see what happens, you have the chance for more motive hits because more attacks, and it's a spread per single attack, and motive hits stack. So the von Luckner, like all vehicles, is a little bit vulnerable, or really vulnerable, depending on the tactica that your opponent can pull off, to those motive type hits. And it's got okay speed, but it's not like a hovercraft type speed. So having that little extra punch with the machine gun and the flamer on the mech side, yeah, I get close enough to your mech, I'm going to machine gun you, I'm going to fire everything. But I appreciate and have that so we can cautiously approach an infantry nest, and at least if I keep forward facing, cut down the motive hits, spray you with the machine guns, douse you, I was going to say Prometheum, but that's 40K, douse you with whatever flamethrower stuff it is for Battletech. That's a little bit of at least something in there. And in such a main heavy battle tank, I would expect that. Going back to this idea, a battle mech without legs, it's an aggressive close-in fighter type tank, but it's got something. It's not dedicated long range. It's not dedicated to other aspects, but it's got something at long range to deal with infantry, to deal with vehicles, to deal with mechs. A solid battle tank. How much battle value? We are looking at, and I cheated a little bit. I wrote this down. 1058. Just crunch the numbers and think of a mech that has that type of armor and type of weaponry, and your battle value is way up. But again, mechs have the possibility for physical attacks. They're not vulnerable to motive hits. There's a lot of positives and tactical advantages that battle mechs have that vehicles don't. But if we're looking for weapon systems and we're looking for competitive weapon systems and we're crunching the numbers with battle value, von Luckner is up there. Von Luckner is up there. And you know, this on a side note, I just thought of this now. I'm gonna have to do a little research here. I'm gonna come up with like a von Fritz tank. Got to keep the tonnage. So I'm gonna come up with the von Fritz, and I'm gonna find someone to like 3D print that model for me. And I'm going to paint it, and I'm going to play it, and we're just going to try and blow up as much as we can with it. But looking at those heavy tanks, if you're new to Battletech, you'll get to incorporating them in your collection. You will. But being aware of how powerful some of these tanks can be. You play some of the higher-end Spectrum mechs, you know, assaults and heavy-end, higher heavy-end heavies. There's a lot of firepower. There's a lot of damage. Tanks can equal that. Tanks can really put the hurt on your mech, and we want to start thinking about that. So when you face them as a mech warrior, as a mech commander, you're ready to go.